Hey everybody, it's Crypto-Anarchist here, and I'm bringing you guys another video on cryptocurrencies. In today's video, it's going to be a little bit different. This video is going to be titled "A Message to Roger Ver." It's also a message to anyone who owns Bitcoin Cash and wants it to succeed. These are the things you need to start spreading around your community. These are the things you need to start emailing your developers about, making sure they get put on roadmaps. These are the things that are going to make Bitcoin Cash dominate Bitcoin SegWit. So what you need to do, Roger, to begin with, is you need to define the message. You keep talking about Bitcoin Cash, and you named it Bitcoin Cash because it's got low fees. That's fine and all, but that's not the main thing behind Bitcoin Cash. Okay, you need to the main thing behind Bitcoin Cash is staying true to the original message of Bitcoin. Bitcoin SegWit, when it adopted SegWit, SegWit is incompatible with the original version of Bitcoin. We'll get to that a little bit later, but the whole purpose of Bitcoin Cash was to stay true to the original message of Bitcoin. So you should adopt the Bitcoin Classic name because the people who were working on Bitcoin Classic dropped Bitcoin Classic to work on Bitcoin Cash. So you need to call your coin Bitcoin Cash, but you need to call the platform for the coin Bitcoin Classic. So just like you have Ethereum and Ether, you would have Bitcoin Classic and Bitcoin Cash. Okay, just like you have Bitcoin and Bitcoins, you would have Bitcoin Classic and Bitcoin Cash. So if you called the platform behind Bitcoin Cash Bitcoin Classic, that would help you to define the message, and so people who would read that, like, what are you buying? If someone says Bitcoin Classic, then someone understands, okay, that's the classic version of Bitcoin. It says it in the name. And then you can also, if you just keep the Bitcoin Cash moniker for your currency, then it doesn't cost you anything as far as changing the name at exchanges and things like that. But anyways, the Bitcoin Classic ethos, it needs to be one transaction per block entry. The main difference between SegWit and Bitcoin Classic or Bitcoin Cash, whatever you want to call it, is that with SegWit you can share other people's channels when you use Lightning channels. With Bitcoin Classic you cannot. So sharing other people's channels in a cryptocurrency is a terrible thing because it actually fractionally reserves your blockchain. I've already talked about this in a video, but basically with Bitcoin SegWit you can have 1,000 transactions off the blockchain on Lightning, and it'll only be one transaction on the blockchain. And what I mean by 1,000 transactions is I'm not talking about the streaming money aspect. There's no problem with streaming money. That's still a one-to-one ratio of transaction to block entry. You can stream money and keep that one-to-one ratio. So Bitcoin Classic can do Lightning at a one-to-one ratio and it'll be fine. But the problem is when you start sharing channels like SegWit does, you can have a transaction get routed through 1,000 different people. And so that should be 1,000 different transactions, but it's only one transaction on the Bitcoin network. So that's a real big issue. The other thing you guys got to understand, and I didn't talk about this too much in my video on it the other day, but the fractional reserve blockchains, they actually can experience bank runs because if you have too many people try and close out their Lightning channel too quickly, then what happens is that you will actually congest the network and you will run into a nightmare scenario where everyone keeps trying to close out their transactions on the Lightning network, which just leads to higher fees and more bloat. And so because you're limited by the block size on Bitcoin SegWit's version of Lightning, you'll have more and more people try and close out their transactions. And the terrible thing about Lightning is if you don't close out your transaction in time, you lose your money. So with Bitcoin SegWit's version of Lightning, you can have bank runs where people literally lose all their money and there's nothing they can do about it. Like, that's terrible. That can never happen with Bitcoin Classic. You need to push that. You can have bank runs with Bitcoin SegWit. You cannot have bank runs with Bitcoin Classic because Bitcoin Classic is completely determined and is completely committed to the original version of Bitcoin. So you need to start talking about how Bitcoin Classic is the only version of Bitcoin with a fully reserved blockchain. It's the only version of Bitcoin that cannot have bank runs. You can have bank runs with Bitcoin SegWit. You know, that's retarded. That's completely retarded. It's like, why did you trade one fractional reserve banking system for a fractional reserve blockchain in Bitcoin SegWit? It's stupid. So you really need to talk about that. Next thing you need to do, Roger, is you need to create a roadmap. Now, the good thing about a roadmap is you just throw some things up on a piece of paper and you don't have to finish them for years, but it gives people an idea of where you're planning on going. So the first thing you need on your roadmap is the biggest issue people have with Bitcoin Classic, Bitcoin Cash, whatever you want to call it. The big issue they have is that you do not have, like, small nodes can't help the network process transactions. And so this is actually a lie. Ethereum's been working on blockchain sharding for a while. They haven't implemented it. It's not the easiest thing to implement. It'd be something very hard to implement like Lightning. But the thing about the blockchain sharding is until you have like 10 to 20 megabyte block sizes, blockchain sharding doesn't matter. Like 8 megabyte block sizes is not that big. Doesn't really seem to matter all that much. And it'll take a while to fill that up anyways. So you just put this blockchain sharding on your roadmap. And again, blockchain sharding, all you do with blockchain sharding is you split up the blockchain into small parts. So if your node is not capable of running the entire blockchain and validating all transactions on the blockchain, you only validate some. So blockchain sharding would actually give Bitcoin Classic more node participation than Bitcoin SegWit. So if you just put this on the roadmap, then when people say, oh, you don't have enough nodes on Bitcoin Classic or Bitcoin Cash, whatever they call it, they'll probably call it Bcash. I don't mind if it gets called Bcash so long as you call the Bitcoin or the platform Bitcoin Classic. But people say, oh yeah, Bcash won't have enough nodes, and it'll be like, yeah, actually we'll have more nodes than you. So if you can do this blockchain sharding, then you basically have just beat Bitcoin SegWit through the sharding alone. Now the next thing you need to talk about is the Bitcoin Classic Lightning GUI application. So the big thing in Bitcoin SegWit is they talk about their Lightning application. Well, the difference between Bitcoin Classic Lightning and the Bitcoin SegWit version of Lightning is that under Bitcoin Classic or Bitcoin Cash Lightning, there's a one-to-one relationship between your transaction off the blockchain and your transaction on the blockchain. So those of you who aren't super familiar with Lightning, it's basically like a bar tab. You start a transaction but you don't finish it. So it's one transaction but you just sort of keep it going for a while. And there's nothing wrong with that. This keeps a one-to-one relationship with the transactions on the blockchain with transactions off the blockchain, because an open-ended transaction isn't a transaction until you close it. So it's still a one-to-one relationship. So Bitcoin Classic can do Lightning. The difference between Bitcoin Classic's version of Lightning and Bitcoin SegWit's version of Lightning is that under Bitcoin SegWit you share other people's channels, so you can actually do 1,000 transactions to 1,000 different people off the blockchain, and it'll only be represented by one transaction on the blockchain. So the issue with this again is that if you have like let's say you have a Lightning node who just decides not to cooperate and they decide to just quit and close all their Lightning channels, you'll flood the network with a bunch of transactions that are trying to clear, and because you just flooded the network with all those transactions trying to clear, anyone else whose timer is going to run out before those transactions clears, they have to try and clear their transaction too, and so then the fees just rise massively. So we already talked about how Bitcoin SegWit's version of Lightning will raise fees massively. Well, if this sort of nightmare bank run scenario happens in Bitcoin SegWit, expect fees of over, it could be $1,000, $10,000, even $100,000, because people will pay as much money as they can to ensure their funds aren't stolen. So under Bitcoin SegWit's version of Lightning, you can have all of your funds stolen, and that's just a way the system sort of works. Okay, that's a fact of the system. You have bank runs because it's a fractionally reserved banking system. So you need to put on the roadmap that Bitcoin Classic is coming out with Lightning, but it's going to be a one-to-one transaction to block entry relationship, because you do not want bank runs in your cryptocurrency. I don't even know why I have to say this. Like Bitcoin SegWit, you can have bank runs in it. How stupid is that? And it's not bank runs as in like if you put your Bitcoin with an exchange, you'll have a bank run with your exchange. The entire Bitcoin system will have a bank run. The entire Bitcoin system will have a run. And that's just because that's the way that Lightning on SegWit works. If some people decide not to cooperate, it's a terrible idea. It's an absolutely terrible idea. So you need to put up that you're going to use a Bitcoin Classic version of Lightning, and then you also need to put up how it's going to be different from Bitcoin SegWit. You just need to put this on the roadmap. And again, because Bitcoin Cash is going to have super low fees, Lightning doesn't matter for like 5-10 years. It really doesn't. Nobody's going to use it. So it doesn't really matter, but you need to put on there that your version of Lightning is superior to SegWit's, because it is. Because Bitcoin Classic or Bitcoin Cash can do Lightning and not have bank runs. This is super important. You cannot do Lightning on SegWit and guarantee that you won't have a bank run. It's the exact same situation as fractional reserve banking, except again, the way that Bitcoin SegWit does it is they fractionally reserve their blockchain. So if a bunch of people try and clear their transactions, they'll realize you don't have enough blockchain to do everything you're trying to do on Bitcoin SegWit, and so you have a bank run. This is stupid. It's retarded. It's completely retarded. I've said this before. You can kind of use SegWit version of Lightning in a proof of stake cryptocurrency, but you can't do it in a proof of work one. And doing it to Bitcoin is stupid. Like if they were doing SegWit to an altcoin, maybe that would be worth investing in because it's interesting. But to the #1 cryptocurrency, like they just made Bitcoin SegWit an altcoin. The final thing you need to put on the roadmap is Bitcoin Classic compatible altcoins. Bitcoin Classic it's much better with altcoins that are compatible with it. So you can't use really Bitcoin Classic with SegWit altcoins. You don't really want to mix with those all that much because they're fractionally reserved. The second thing is that the one thing that the SegWit version of Lightning has over the Classic version of Lightning is it has a lot of anonymity advantages. So like you send Bitcoin through Lightning and nobody knows exactly where it was sent from. It's hard to trace, let's just put it that way. Well, the way that Bitcoin Classic gets anonymity is through atomic swaps with altcoins. So you need altcoins that are able to handle the transaction throughput that Bitcoin Classic does, so they have to be big block altcoins that do not have SegWit, and they have to be privacy focused altcoins. So, maybe it's privacy coins like, Zcoin, which I know, Roger, you're one of the angel investors in Zcoin. I don't know if Zcoin is planning on doing SegWit, I'm not entirely sure, but any of these cryptocurrencies that adopt SegWit, you can just create a Bitcoin Classic version of it, and then boom, you're good to go. The other thing that doing a Bitcoin Classic version of these other altcoins will do is you can perform a network-wide miner drain. So the issue with the Bitcoin Classic sort of, I guess you could say, attack vector on Bitcoin SegWit is that Bitcoin Classic is an old coin, mine's the same ratio as Bitcoin SegWit, so in order for it to succeed, it's got to build more hype around it than Bitcoin SegWit. Now, until a bank run occurs on Bitcoin SegWit, this might actually be hard to do. So Bitcoin Classic put itself, or Bitcoin Cash, it put itself sort of in a bad situation in that, like, it's got to do something amazing in order to beat Bitcoin, or it's got to wait for Bitcoin to fail, which might just take a little while. But if you create a bunch of altcoins that are compatible with Bitcoin Classic, and you know already that Bitcoin Classic or Bitcoin Cash, whatever you want to call it, it has a market support. It's the number 4 crypto right now. So it's got a big market behind it. So you know that there's a huge market ready for the same types of altcoins. And the other thing that you can do with these altcoins is, the lowest cost cryptocurrencies are always altcoins. So if a couple altcoins come out that are $1 that are classic coins, people will start making more money with these classic altcoins just because they're young, and so then they'll be looking for more classic altcoins. So if you can do this, though, if you get a bunch of younger classic versions, non-SegWit versions of all these cryptocurrencies that are activating SegWit, you can always outmine these older coins, because if you're a younger coin, your inflation rate is higher, so you actually attract you can attract a lot more miners. I know that's not exactly how it works. That's a very simplified version of how to sort of do a network-wide miner drain, but you can force the entire hand of the market. But again, yeah, if you really want Bitcoin Cash to succeed, call the currency Bitcoin Cash, call it B Cash, I don't give a damn what you call it, but call the platform Bitcoin Classic, because that's what it is. And then you need to start hammering down the point that Bitcoin SegWit is a fractionally reserved blockchain under which you will have bank runs. You can't really call it a bank run because it's not a bank that's having a run, but you will have blockchain runs where you'll have a bunch of people try and close out their transactions on the Lightning Network, but then that'll actually increase fees. And then if you have an uncooperative Lightning node, that breaks the entire Lightning setup. Like if there's one big Lightning node, a big huge hub of a Lightning node that quits and forces everyone to close out their transactions, the Bitcoin SegWit block size cannot handle it, and so that's it. And so a lot of these people will literally lose their money. They won't be able to clear their transactions. So you'll be forced either between paying a fee of $100 to $1,000 to maybe even $10,000 on Bitcoin SegWit, or losing all your money. It's like that's a terrible situation. So you need to hammer that point down. Bitcoin Classic is all about a one-to-one relationship between transactions on the blockchain and transactions off the blockchain. Okay, Bitcoin SegWit does not do that, and so it's a fractionally reserved blockchain, and it's going to have blockchain runs. So it's a terrible idea. But anyways, if you want, Roger, if you do watch this, thanks for watching first, but you really got to get on this as far as the marketing goes, because you guys are not hammering this point down. And Bitcoin SegWit has done a bunch of terrible things to itself that are absolutely, they're deadly to the top cryptocurrency. Bitcoin SegWit's an altcoin. It should remain an altcoin. SegWit should only be tried on altcoins. But anyways, that's my thoughts on it. I hope you enjoyed this video. There will be more coming out soon.